The twin sons of Ryloth Prime cast their harsh glow upon the grand slave market. 1,000 voices rose and fell in chaotic rhythm, traders shouting, guards barking, desperate captives begging for mercy. Among the countless species displayed like livestock, one figure stood apart. A young human, thin but sharp-eyed, sat in a cage near the front. His name was Kale, though the traders simply called him the Terran. Humans were rare in this part of the galaxy, and rarer still in chains. Most who encountered them dismissed them as fragile, unimportant. But Kale had survived capture, the long journey, and now the humiliation of the market. His eyes did not show defeat. They showed fire. Bidding began with the clang of a hammer. Alien nobles, merchants, and warlords walked past, inspecting the merchandise. Many laughed when they reached Kale. "Too weak," muttered a scaled Gorthian. "Unimpressive," said a silver-skinned envoy. "Not worth the feed it would eat," another scoffed. Kale clenched his fists but said nothing. He had learned that silence could sometimes protect him more than words. Then the market grew still. Whispers spread like fire in dry grass. The crowd parted as a procession entered the hall. Soldiers clad in shimmering black armor marched in formation, their weapons glowing with restrained power. Behind them came attendants carrying banners of deep crimson and gold. And then she appeared, Queen Xerath of the Thalcor Dominion. Her presence alone silenced the market. Towering and regal, her form was lithe but commanding, with a crown of bone-like crests rising from her head. Her eyes glowed faintly, not with cruelty but with an intensity that made lesser beings tremble. She was ruler of dozens of worlds, conqueror of fleets, and the last being anyone expected to walk into a slave market. "Why is she here?" someone whispered. "She has no need of slaves." Another hissed. Kyle straightened in his cage as her gaze swept across the rows of captives. She did not pause for the tall warriors nor the strong laborers. Her steps, slow and deliberate, carried her past the towering gladiators and rare creatures. She walked directly to him. The guard stiffened. "My queen, this one is unremarkable. A human, weak and—" "Open the cage," she commanded. The guard obeyed without question. The lock clicked open and Kale was hauled to his feet. For the first time, his eyes met hers. There was no hatred in her stare, no mockery, only study as though she were examining a puzzle. "This one," Queen Xerath declared. "I will take him." The market erupted in gasps. Traders scrambled, offering her entire groups of stronger, more exotic slaves. She ignored them all. The auctioneer, nearly trembling, stammered, "Of course, Majesty, but surely you do not wish to— Do you question me?" The alien paled and bowed low. "No, Majesty. Forgive me." Kale was bound and led behind her procession. As they departed the market, whispers followed. Why would the queen buy a human? What value could such a creature hold? The journey to the royal palace was overwhelming. The queen's flagship was unlike anything Kale had imagined, an immense vessel shaped like a crescent moon, gleaming with polished obsidian alloys. Inside, the hall stretched high with glowing murals that seemed alive, shifting as one passed by. Every alien who crossed their path lowered their head as the queen walked past, and every one of them eyed Kale with confusion or contempt. He was taken to a private chamber, not a dungeon. The walls shimmered with soft light, the floor layered with fabric so smooth it felt like water beneath his bare feet. Food was brought to him, rich and fragrant, unlike the stale rations he had endured as a prisoner. But his relief was thin. Why had she taken him? What purpose did she have? That night the answer began to unfold. When the door slid open, Queen Xerath herself entered. She dismissed her guards and attendants, leaving only her and Kale in the chamber. He rose to his feet, unsure whether to bow or stand tall. "You are Kale of Terra," she said, her voice calm but carrying a weight that pressed upon him like a physical force. "You know my name?" he asked before he could stop himself. Her eyes glimmered. "I know many things. Your records were retrieved from the ship that carried you here. And I know this. Your species is underestimated. Small in number, fragile in form, yet stubborn. Always surviving where stronger races perish." Kale frowned. "If you know this, why treat me like a slave?" The queen tilted her head. "Because you are not here as a slave." "Not truly. You are here as—" "A test." "A test? Yes, my empire is strong in weapons but weak in imagination. My people follow tradition too blindly. They lack the ability to see beyond the patterns carved by centuries of conquest. I seek something different." Kale's pulse quickened. And you think you'll find that in me? I think, she said softly, that in your kind lies something my empire desperately needs: adaptability, ingenuity, the will to survive against impossible odds. Kale's mind raced. Was this some trick, or did she truly believe it? The Queen stepped closer. You will serve me, but not with chains of iron. You will serve me with your mind, your choices, and your courage. Fail, and you will return to the fate of any slave. Succeed, and perhaps you will rise higher than any human has ever dreamed. Her words echoed in the chamber long after she departed. The days that followed were strange. Kale was tested in ways he did not expect. He was placed in simulations where entire star systems faced collapse, and he had to choose who to save. He was challenged with puzzles designed to measure creativity, not strength. And at times he was thrown into physical trials, not against warriors, but against environments meant to break him. Each time, Kale used not brute power, but cleverness. When a chamber flooded with poison gas, he used simple cloth to filter air long enough to find an exit. When forced to negotiate with hostile AI constructs, he relied on persuasion, not threats. Where others saw dead ends, Kale found paths. And each time he succeeded, the Queen watched, her expression unreadable. But Kale noticed something else. Not everyone in the palace supported her choice. Whispers of discontent grew louder. Ministers scoffed at the pet human. Generals laughed behind closed doors. He could feel the eyes of jealousy and hatred upon him. Yet Queen Zirath never wavered. On the 7th day, after Kale completed a test no Talcor had solved in generations, she stood before her court and declared, "This human will remain at my side. He is more than slave. He is proof that even the smallest spark can light a path through darkness." The hall fell silent. Some bowed, others glared. But none dared challenge her openly. Kale, standing at her side, felt both fear and wonder. Only a week ago he had been a nameless captive. Now the most powerful being in the Empire had chosen him for something far greater. But deep inside he also sensed danger. For every ally he gained in her presence, he had earned twice as many enemies in the shadows. And as the Queen's gaze lingered on him, Kyle realized his journey had only just begun. The palace of Queen Zirath was a place of awe and danger. Its high walls shimmered with alien symbols, and its halls were filled with silent watchers, generals, ministers, scholars, and spies. Kale had been inside for only a short time, yet already he felt the weight of countless eyes upon him. Some stared with curiosity, others with contempt. Though the Queen had spoken of him as more than a slave, the truth was harsher. To the court, Kale was still an outsider, a creature from a backwater world unworthy of standing beside their ruler. Many whispered he was a foolish experiment, a weakness in the Queen's judgment. But Queen Zirath cared nothing for whispers. She had plans of her own. On the morning after her declaration, Kyle was summoned to the Hall of Challenges. It was a vast chamber of black stone open to the sky, where the sons of Ryloth Prime burned down like watchful eyes. Soldiers lined the edges of the arena. Nobles sat in balconies above, their voices low, their gazes sharp. The Queen entered with her usual calm authority, her crimson robes flowing like fire behind her. She lifted a hand and silence fell. "Kale of Terra," she said, her voice carrying across the chamber. "Today you will be tested." Kale stepped forward. His heart pounded, but he forced himself to stand tall. "Tested? How?" "In many ways," she answered. "My people respect strength, but they have forgotten that strength takes many forms. You will show them." At her signal, a platform rose from the floor, carrying strange objects, metal spheres, shifting puzzles, devices glowing with alien light. "Your first test is of the mind," she declared. The first puzzle seemed simple. A series of spheres rotated around each other, linked by beams of light. The task, the Queen explained, was to arrange them into balance before the beams collapsed and destroyed the construct. Kale studied it carefully. He had no training in alien physics, yet he noticed patterns. The spheres moved faster when grouped, slower when separated. Instead of forcing them into a perfect design, as the Thalcor scholars had tried for centuries, he shifted them into an uneven rhythm. Imperfect but balanced, the construct stabilized. The beams glowed steady. Gasps rose from the balconies. "He solved it," someone whispered. "Impossible. No outsider could." Queen Zirath's eyes glimmered with quiet satisfaction. The second trial was harsher. Kale was thrown into a chamber that filled with freezing mist. Sharp crystals of ice began to grow from the walls, closing in around him. He had only moments to escape. The Thalakor expected him to fight the ice directly, to break it with strength. But Kale had no strength to match. Instead, he used speed. He broke small shards from the walls and jammed them into the cracks where the ice grew thickest, slowing the spread. Then he crawled through a narrow gap before the chamber froze solid. When he stumbled back into the arena, shivering but alive, the crowd murmured again, this time with less mockery, more surprise. The final test of the day was not physical or mental, but social. Kale was placed in a simulation with holographic figures representing alien leaders. He was given command of limited resources while their worlds faced disaster, floods, famine, and rebellion. Where the Thalakor might have chosen to save only the strongest, Kale made different choices. He gave supplies to the weakest colony, ensuring no one was abandoned. He negotiated peace where others expected war. His strategies were messy, sometimes risky, but in the end the simulation showed survival across all colonies. The nobles who watched were divided. Some sneered at his choices, calling them soft. Others frowned, realizing they had never considered such approaches. Queen Zirath raised her hand again. The human has passed the first circle of trials. He has shown that even weakness can become strength. Kale breathed hard, sweat on his brow, but he stood straight. He was not sure if he had won anything, or only painted a larger target on his back. In the days that followed, more tests came. Some were arranged by the queen herself, others by ministers who wished to see him fail. Kale was sent into simulated battlefields, forced to navigate political debates, and once even dropped into a barren desert with nothing but a jug of water and told to survive. Each time he used not muscle but wit, patience, and the stubbornness of a human who refused to break, and each time Queen Zirath was there watching. Sometimes she gave the faintest nod, a sign of approval that few ever received, but not all were pleased. One night, as Kale returned to his chamber, he found a shadow waiting. A tall Thalakor officer stepped forward, his armor gleaming in the dim light. His crest marked him as General Torvak, a name Kale had already heard whispered with fear. "You should not be here, human," Torvak growled. "The Queen's mercy blinds her. But I see you for what you are, an insect crawling where it does not belong." Kale steadied his breath. "Then why not crush me now?" The general's eyes narrowed. "Because she protects you. But know this, if you stumble even once, I will be there to end you." With that, Torvak vanished into the shadows. Kyle sat awake long into the night. He was no fool. He knew that survival in the Queen's palace was not just about passing her trials, but also surviving the hatred of those around him. The next trial came sooner than expected. During a grand feast in the palace, nobles gathered to celebrate a recent victory in war. The Queen presided from her throne, Kale seated at her side. The hall was filled with alien music, the scent of spiced food and the hum of conversation. Then suddenly, a servant carrying a tray stumbled near the throne. The tray clattered, and in that moment Kale noticed something. A flash of metal hidden beneath the food, a blade disguised as decoration. Without thought, Kale lunged forward. He grabbed the servant's arm just as the blade struck downward. The hall erupted in chaos as guards rushed forward. The assassin was seized, struggling, hissing curses in a language Kale didn't know. Queen Zirath stood tall, her eyes burning like stars. She turned to Kale. "You saved my life." The hall fell silent. Every noble, every soldier stared at the human who had just thrown himself between death and their ruler. Kale's chest heaved as he caught his breath. "I only did what anyone would do." "No," she said firmly. "Not anyone, you." From that night onward, Kale's place in the palace changed. Some looked at him with new respect, others with deeper hatred. Whispers grew louder. The Queen trusts the human. The human dares to stand at her side. But for Kale, the meaning was clear. He was no longer just a captive, nor even just a test subject. He had become part of something larger. A dangerous game of politics, survival, and trust in a world where a single mistake could end him. And though fear gnawed at him, another feeling began to grow. Hope. Hope that perhaps his life in chains had not been the end of his story, but the beginning of something far greater. The palace of Queen Zirath was never quiet. Its halls carried whispers like rivers carried water, flowing endlessly, carrying secrets, lies, and fear. For Kale, each day in the palace felt heavier than the last. He had passed the queen's trials and even saved her life from an assassin's blade, but victory only made the shadows around him grow darker. Everywhere he walked, nobles stared, some with curiosity, others with hate. The generals frowned openly. Ministers lowered their voices when he passed. Even the servants, though polite, avoided his eyes. To them he was a strange piece on the queen's chessboard, an outsider placed too close to power. Kale often wondered what he truly was. A slave, an advisor, a pawn in a game he barely understood. One night Queen Zirath called for him again. Her throne chamber was vast, lit by blue fire that rose from tall braziers. The walls shimmered with carvings of battles long past, glorious victories, endless wars, proud rulers of her line. Yet when Kale entered, the hall was empty. No guards, no ministers, only the queen herself seated in silence. "Come forward, Kale of Terra," she said. He obeyed, his footsteps echoing across the stone. When he stopped before her throne, she rose and descended the steps. For the first time, she looked less like an untouchable ruler, and more like a woman carrying a heavy burden. "You wonder why I brought you here," she said. Kale hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, I wonder every day." Her eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger, but as if weighing his honesty. "Then listen, and understand. What I tell you now, no other outsider has ever heard." She led him through hidden passages behind the throne, down winding stairs carved into black stone. At last they entered a chamber deep beneath the palace. The air was cool and heavy, the walls lined with ancient machines whose faint hum echoed like distant drums. In the center stood a great device, shaped like a sphere of glass and metal, suspended by chains of light. Inside it swirled images, worlds burning, fleets falling, empires collapsing. "This," the queen said, "is the throne core. It remembers everything my empire has been, and everything it will become." Kale stared. "It shows the future?" "Not the future. Possibilities, paths, shadows of what may be. And most of them end the same way." Her voice grew quiet. "With fire, with ruin." She stepped closer to the sphere, her reflection glowing in its light. "The Thalcor Dominion is strong in weapons, strong in numbers, but strength has made us blind. We repeat the same choices, the same wars, the same arrogance. My council calls it tradition. I call it weakness." Kale felt a chill. "And you think I can change that?" She turned to him, her eyes sharp. "You already have. The way you think, the way you act, it is not like us. When faced with choice, you see paths we cannot. You saved me not with strength, but with instinct. You solved trials that my best scholars failed. You united enemies inside the simulation instead of destroying them. That is why I chose you." Her words struck Kale like a blade and a gift at the same time. He wanted to protest, to say he was just a man, not a savior. Yet deep inside, a spark of pride lit within him. But the queen was not finished. "There are those who will never accept you. General Torvak and his allies already conspire. They believe my interest in you weakens me. They whisper of replacing me, even if it means civil war. And the core shows me this. If my people do not change, the Dominion will fall. Not today, not tomorrow, but soon. Perhaps within my lifetime." Silence filled the chamber. Kale stared at the swirling visions inside the throne core. Armies consumed by flames, cities reduced to ash, stars darkened by war. He shivered. "So?"
"What do you want me to do?"
he asked quietly. The queen's eyes softened. "Stand at my side. Not as a slave, not even as a servant, but as an advisor, as proof to my people that we can learn from others. That strength is not the only path. If you help me, Kale, we may save more than my throne. We may save countless worlds from the ruin I have seen." The days that followed were unlike anything Kale had ever imagined. No longer confined to chambers or trials, he was brought into the council halls themselves. There, beneath vaulted ceilings of crystal light, ministers and generals gathered around long tables to debate matters of war and politics. Kale sat beside the queen, silent at first, but always watching. He saw how rigid the council was. Every problem had only one solution in their eyes: force. Rebels, crush them. Shortages? Seize from weaker worlds. Borders threatened? Launch fleets. Their answers were strong but predictable. When at last the queen asked Kale for his thoughts, the chamber erupted in outrage. "He is no Thalcor," one minister shouted. A human has no place here, cried another. General Torvak sneered. Majesty, this is a dangerous insult. Will you let a slave speak in the Hall of Rulers? But the queen silenced them with a single gesture. Let him speak. Kale's heart pounded, but he rose to his feet. He spoke not with grand words, but with honesty. You are strong, stronger than any empire I have ever seen. But strength can also be a cage. When you fight the same way every time, your enemies learn. When you take without thought, your people break. Sometimes, survival means bending, not breaking others. His words were met with silence, broken only by laughter from some nobles. Yet others frowned, thoughtful. The queen nodded. Well spoken. That night, Kyle learned just how dangerous his new role was. As he walked back to his chamber, a shadow blocked his path. General Torvak stood there again, his face twisted in disdain. You dare to speak in our halls, Torvak growled. You dare to lecture us, human. You think saving the queen once makes you untouchable? Kyle forced himself not to step back. I think I am here because she trusts me. Torvak leaned close, his voice a low snarl. Trust can be broken. And accidents happen in the dark. Before Kale could reply, the sound of armored boots echoed down the hall. The queen's guards appeared, their eyes fixed on Torvak. The general stepped away, his expression calm once more. He bowed mockingly toward Kale and vanished into the shadows. Kale exhaled slowly. He understood now. His enemies were not only in whispers. They were real, and they were waiting for him to stumble. Days turned into weeks. Kale grew into his role, offering the queen advice, sometimes small, sometimes daring. Not all his ideas were accepted, but some were. And when they succeeded, it made the council uneasy. A famine on a colony was ended not by force, but by trade agreements, Kale suggested. A border skirmish was resolved without bloodshed by offering aid instead of threats. Each victory, small though it seemed, strengthened the queen's position and weakened her enemies. Yet the danger only grew. The shadows whispered louder, and the throne core continued to show dark possibilities, flickering with visions of fire. One evening, after another tense council, Kale stood on a balcony overlooking the city below. The alien stars burned bright, unfamiliar yet beautiful. He wondered how a human from a forgotten world had come here, into the heart of an empire, holding secrets that could decide the fate of millions. Behind him, the queen's voice spoke softly. Do you regret staying? Kale turned. She stood beside him, her gaze fixed on the stars. Sometimes, he admitted. But then I think, maybe this is why I survived. Maybe this is where I was meant to be. The queen's eyes lingered on him. Then hold to that thought, for the days ahead will test us both. The rebellion grows bolder. And soon, Kale, the true trial will begin. Her words hung in the night air, heavy with warning, and as Kale looked back at the stars, he felt both fear and determination. The secrets of the throne had been revealed, but the cost of knowing them had only begun to unfold. The throne room of Queen Zirath had once been filled with confidence, but now fear crawled in its shadows. Kyle felt it every day, the change in the air, the growing tension in the faces of guards and ministers. The whispers of rebellion were no longer whispers. They were shouts behind closed doors, movements in the dark, weapons gathering in secret. General Torvak's name came up again and again. He had become the voice of those who hated Kale, and of those who thought the queen had grown weak. He promised the nobles a return to the old strength of the Dominion, war, conquest, and the silencing of all weakness. Kale knew this rebellion was no small danger. The queen's empire stretched across dozens of worlds, but unity was thin. One spark could set it all on fire. That spark came sooner than anyone expected. It began on the world of Velkar, a mining colony at the edge of the Dominion. Reports reached the palace that workers there had risen against their overseers. At first, the ministers laughed. Rebellions were common in the outer colonies and usually crushed in days. But then the truth emerged. The miners were armed with weapons too advanced for common rebels. Kale sat beside Queen Zirath during the council session when the news arrived. The ministers argued at once, shouting over each other. Send the fleet, one demanded. Crush them at once, cried another. They cannot stand against our armies. But Kale frowned. He had seen this before, though in smaller ways. If rebels already have advanced weapons, someone is feeding them. This is not just anger. This is organized. The queen raised her hand. Silence fell. Her gaze was fixed on Kale. You believe this rebellion is no accident? Yes, Kale answered firmly. And if Velkar falls, it will not stop there. It will spread. It could already be spreading. Torvak, seated across the table, leaned forward with a smirk. And what do you suggest, human? That we negotiate with traitors? That we give them mercy? Kale's jaw tightened. I suggest we think before we strike. Find the root. If we cut the leaves but not the root, the plant grows back stronger. Some ministers scoffed. Others muttered uneasily. But the Queen's eyes glimmered with thought. We will investigate, she said, and we will prepare. The investigation did not take long. Within weeks, evidence surfaced that the rebellion was supplied from within the Dominion itself. Stolen weapons, smuggled ships, hidden funds, all traced back to secret supporters in the heart of the Empire. When this truth reached the palace, the Queen's fears were confirmed. The rebellion was no accident. It was the work of traitors, and Torvak's hand was everywhere in the shadows. One evening, Kyle found himself alone in the great library of the palace, studying old records of past rebellions. His mind searched for patterns, for anything that might help. That was when he heard the footsteps. He turned to see one of the palace guards approach, a young soldier whose armor seemed too heavy for him. The soldier's face was pale. Human, he whispered. You must be careful. They are moving soon. They will strike here. Kale's blood ran cold. Here in the palace? The soldier nodded, fear in his eyes. General Torvak gathers allies. He waits for the right moment. He means to kill the Queen. Before Kale could ask more, the soldier hurried away, vanishing into the corridors. Kale knew then that war was not far away. It was already at their doorstep. The attack came 3 nights later. It began with explosions in the city below. Towers of smoke rose against the alien stars. Bells rang across the capital as citizens fled in panic. Armored troops stormed the streets, banners of rebellion flying above them. Inside the palace, alarms blared. Kale was awakened by the thunder of weapons. He rushed from his chamber, only to find guards clashing in the halls, some loyal to the Queen, others betraying her. The air filled with the roar of battle. He fought not with weapons but with speed, ducking through side passages, dodging strikes as he searched for the throne chamber. His heart pounded with one thought: she must survive. When he reached the throne, Queen Zirath already stood in her battle armor, a blade of crackling energy in her hand. Loyal soldiers gathered around her, though their numbers were few. Kyle, she said, her voice steady even in chaos, the fire has begun. I know, he answered, breathless, but we can still put it out. The battle for the palace was fierce. Rebels stormed the gates, their weapons blazing. The halls shook with every blast. Kale stayed close to the Queen, giving warnings, spotting ambushes, guiding soldiers through narrow corridors where numbers mattered less. At one point, the Queen was surrounded by 5 armored rebels. Kale, unarmed, grabbed a fallen banner pole and struck one from behind, giving her the opening to finish the others. He fought clumsily but with desperation, and that was enough. Everywhere he went, he shouted to the loyal soldiers, "Stand! Do not give up. You fight for more than the throne, you fight for your homes, your families, your future." His words carried farther than he expected. Soldiers who had been wavering found strength in them. Some who had feared the rebellion turned back to the Queen's side. For the first time, Kale saw what the Queen meant. Sometimes survival came not from strength but from spirit. But the enemy was vast, and soon the great gates of the palace trembled under the assault of a weapon unlike any Kale had seen. It was ancient, a relic of war long past, dragged from the vaults by Torvak's rebels. A siege engine of pure energy glowing like a star in chains. With each strike, the gates cracked. With each strike, the palace walls shook. Kale's stomach turned. If that weapon breaks through, we cannot hold them. The Queen nodded grimly. Then we must stop it before it does. She turned to her soldiers. Hold the palace. Do not let them pass. Kale and I will deal with the weapon. The soldiers bowed, though fear shone in their eyes. Under the cover of smoke and chaos, Kale and the Queen slipped through hidden passages to the outer walls. There, in the distance, he saw the weapon, towering, monstrous, guarded by lines of rebels. Its glow lit the night sky like a rising sun. How can we fight that? Kale whispered. The Queen's blade hummed to life. Not with force alone. Do you see a way? Kale's mind raced. He studied the machine. It was massive but clumsy. Its energy coils glowed too bright, too unstable. And then he saw it, the vents near the base releasing bursts of steam. Cooling vents? If we block those vents, Kale said quickly, the machine will overheat. It will collapse on itself. The Queen glanced at him, then nodded. Then that is what we shall do. The plan was madness. Together they crept closer, using shadows and fallen rubble for cover. Kale's heart hammered in his chest, but he pushed forward, crawling when he had to, sprinting when danger passed. At the base of the machine, the Queen struck down guards with precise movements, while Kale grabbed scraps of metal and jammed them into the vents. One by one, the vents clogged. The machine groaned. Its glow flared brighter. The rebels realized too late. A roar of energy tore through the night as the ancient weapon overloaded. The ground shook as it collapsed in on itself, fire bursting into the sky. Cheers rose from the loyal soldiers on the walls. The rebellion's greatest weapon was gone, but Kale and the Queen had no time to celebrate. The rebels roared in fury, surging toward them like a tide. Side by side, Queen and human stood together, blades and courage against the storm. By dawn, the palace still stood. The rebellion had not been crushed, but it had been wounded. Torvak himself had not yet shown his face, but his forces had been driven back, for now. Exhausted, Kale leaned against a shattered wall as the suns rose. The Queen stood beside him, her armor scorched, her crown dented, but her eyes burning brighter than ever. "You fought well," she said. "I only survived." Kyle answered with a weak smile. "Sometimes," she replied, "survival is the greatest victory." Kyle looked at the rising suns and knew the war was far from over. The rebellion's fire had only begun to spread, but he also knew something else. Together, he and the Queen had a chance to stop it, and for the first time he believed they could. The palace of Queen Zirath was quiet now, but only in appearance. The city around it still smoldered from the rebellion's fires, and the echoes of battle haunted every corridor. Kale walked through the halls, feeling the weight of the past weeks pressing down on him. He had survived assassins, completed the Queen's trials, and fought beside her against the rebels. Yet the greatest challenge was yet to come. The throne core had shown the Queen visions of fire, destruction, and collapse. The rebellion was only a symptom of a larger truth. The Dominion could no longer rely on strength alone. If the Queen's people did not learn to adapt, the Empire would fall. And now Kale had become a symbol of that change. Queen Zirath summoned him to the throne room at dawn. The air smelled of smoke and scorched stone. Soldiers and citizens alike filed in, watching as the Queen raised her hand. Silence fell. "Kale," she said, her voice calm but carrying authority that shook the room. "The time has come. The future of our empire depends not on fear, not on force, but on the courage of those willing to think differently." Kyle stepped forward, his eyes scanning the gathered faces. Many stared at him with suspicion, others with hope. He remembered the first day he had arrived, how weak, small, and insignificant he had felt. Now he stood before thousands as something more than human. "What must I do?" he asked quietly. The Queen's gaze softened. "You must lead, not with weapons, but with ideas. Show them that even a human, small and fragile by our standards, can teach strength, hope, and unity." The trial began in the council chamber. The remaining rebels had retreated, but the threat had not disappeared. Torvak still commanded hidden forces, ready to strike at the first sign of weakness. Kale understood that the coming challenge was not just physical. It was a test of hearts, minds, and trust. He proposed a bold plan. Instead of punishing the rebel worlds with fleets and armies, he suggested sending aid, medicine, food, and technology. He argued that by showing mercy and building loyalty, the Queen could win over not just the colonies but the hearts of her people. The ministers erupted in protest. "This is foolish," one cried. "Mercy will be seen as weakness." "Torvak will exploit this," another shouted. Kale remained calm. "Foolish is repeating the same mistakes. Weakness is destroying the lives of those who could have been allies. If we act with strategy and care, we can turn enemies into supporters." Queen Zirath watched him, her expression unreadable. Then with a nod she turned to the council. "We will follow his plan. Kale of Terra has spoken. Let it be done." For the next weeks, Kale oversaw the distribution of aid. He traveled with small squads of soldiers to the outer colonies, navigating dangerous terrain, hidden mines, and the remnants of rebel forces. Each colony was different, each challenge unique. Some people welcomed the help with open arms, grateful for food and medicine. Others were suspicious, their eyes wary, their voices loud with accusation. Kale never gave up. He spoke to them, listened to their fears, and promised only what he could deliver. Slowly, distrust turned into trust. Where the Queen's armies had once been feared, the Dominion's presence now became a source of hope. Even in the heart of the Empire, changes began. Soldiers who had doubted him now followed his guidance. Nobles who had mocked him now sought his counsel. And though Torvak's shadow still lingered, his power weakened as loyalty shifted away from fear. But Torvak would not accept defeat so easily. One night, Kyle awoke to the sound of alarms. The rebellion had launched a final desperate assault on the capital. Hidden forces surged through secret tunnels, aiming to take the Queen and end her reign. Kale ran through the palace, his heart hammering. Soldiers clashed in the corridors. Smoke filled the air. He found the Queen standing in the central hall, her blade ignited, facing the enemy's leaders. "Kyle," she shouted. "We cannot hold them all. The weapon they bring will destroy everything." Kale's mind raced. He remembered the ancient siege engine at Velkar and the simple human trick that had defeated it. He studied the new weapon, glowing with energy, its power radiating through the hall. "I see it," he said. "The vents. If we block them, the weapon will overload." The Queen's eyes narrowed. "Then we must act quickly." Together they fought their way to the base of the weapon. Kale dodged strikes and cleared debris, while the Queen defended him with precise, deadly movements. He jammed metal shards into the vents one by one while the Queen held back attackers. The machine groaned, its energy flaring. Finally, with a final block in place, the weapon collapsed in a storm of sparks and fire. The palace shook and the remaining rebels fled in panic. Torvak's plans had failed. The battle was over, but the cost had been high. Buildings were damaged, soldiers wounded, and trust had been tested to its limits. Yet Kale stood beside the Queen, watching the sun rise over the city. "You have done well," she said. Kale shook his head. "We did it together. I only showed them a way. They chose to follow." The Queen's gaze softened. "You have changed more than these people. You have changed me. I bought you as a human from another world, thinking you were weak. You have shown me strength, courage, and hope. More than any weapon, more than any army, you have saved my empire." Kyle felt the weight of her words. From a frightened, captured human to the advisor of the most powerful queen in the galaxy, it was more than he had ever imagined. In the days that followed, Kale worked to rebuild the empire, not with fear but with guidance, compassion, and clever strategy. Colonies once thought lost returned to the Dominion peacefully. Ministers learned to respect his ideas. Soldiers found new pride in protecting, rather than conquering, and the people saw that strength came in many forms, not just in fleets or weapons. Even Torvak had disappeared into hiding, his power broken by the human who had taught the Dominion to think differently. The throne core no longer showed visions of inevitable destruction. Instead, it displayed paths of growth, innovation, and unity. Kale realized that change was possible, and that even a single human could make a difference in a galaxy ruled by aliens. One evening, as the twin suns set over the capital, Kyle stood on the balcony beside the Queen. The city below was quiet, rebuilding, alive. The air smelled of smoke and new growth. "You have earned more than your freedom," the Queen said. "You have earned a place in history." Kyle smiled, looking at the horizon. "I never thought a human could matter here." The Queen turned to him, her eyes glowing. "You are proof that even the smallest spark can light a path through darkness. The Dominion is stronger because of you, and not because of power, but because of hope, courage, and wisdom." Kale took a deep breath, feeling the wind of change on his face. He had begun his journey as a captive, a slave in chains. Now he stood as a symbol of unity, a voice for those who had no voice, a reminder that even in a galaxy of mighty empires, humanity could shine. He looked at the stars above, countless and bright, and knew that this was only the beginning. There were more worlds to guide, more hearts to touch, and more paths to change. The Dominion would endure. Not because it ruled with fear, but because it had learned to listen, adapt, and hope. And in that, Kale knew humanity had found a place among the stars. And somewhere in the galaxy, other humans would hear the story of Kale of Terra, the human who had changed an empire, and perhaps the galaxy itself.